I still taste oil when I dream. Not the refined promethium we fed into the engines, but the thick, ancient stuff that leaked from Honorius's sarcophagus, black and bitter, like drinking centuries. It's been 11 years since the Castelvel salient. 11 years since I learned that some sins don't kill you because your punishment is to keep living. And I still wake up with that taste coating my tongue, seeping between my teeth like accusation made liquid. They tell us the Dreadnoughts are heroes, eternal warriors, they say. The chapter's greatest given a second life in adamantium and ceramite, forever serving the Emperor's will. In the Schola, they showed us picked captures of these walking tombs striding through fire, crushing Xenos beneath their power fists, and we felt nothing but awe. The instructors never mentioned the screaming. They never mentioned what it costs to keep a corpse fighting for 10,000 years, or what happens when the corpse understands more about duty than the living ever could. I was 23 when they assigned me to Tech Marine Zavidius's maintenance crew. Young, proud, grateful beyond measure for the honor of serving the Angels Vermilion. I'd spent 6 years as an auxiliary serf, scrubbing out rhino treads and genuflecting before every space marine who passed, and now I was touching relics. Now I had purpose. My quarters were a cell 3 meters square in the fortress monastery's deepest sublevel, and I loved that cell. I loved the cold. I loved the smell of sacred unguents, and the sound of prayers echoing through ventilation shafts. I loved believing I mattered. Honorius was assigned to our detail in the 3rd month. Even among dreadnoughts, he was ancient. His chassis dated back 7,000 years, marked with honor scrolls, whose high Gothic I couldn't parse, and kill markings from campaigns that predated my homeworld's settlement. The sarcophagus was obsidian black, veined with lines of silver that Zavidius said were chapter master signatures from 40 different lords. When you stood close, you could hear him breathing inside. A wet, mechanical sound, flesh and machine finding rhythm. You will learn his needs before your own. Zavidius told me that first day, his augmetic eye whirring as it focused on my face. Honorius has served longer than our bloodline has existed. He has earned perfection in his care. I nodded. I meant it. I wanted to give perfection. The maintenance protocols were extensive, 6 hours of work for every hour of combat readiness, Zavidius said. We cleaned his weapons with sanctified oils. We recalibrated the targeting systems in his assault cannon. We checked every joint, every servo, every cable for wear. And we woke him, when necessary, to perform the deeper maintenance that required his cooperation. That was the part that changed me, though I didn't recognize it then. That first time hearing him speak, his voxcaster was damaged, had been for centuries. Something in the modulator made every word sound like it was being dragged over broken glass. When we powered up his systems to run diagnostics, his first words were, "How long this time?" 63 days since last waking, honored ancient, Zavidius said, making the sign of the Aquila. We require 3 hours for sacred maintenance. Silence. Then, proceed. That was all. But I heard something underneath the word. Something like exhaustion so profound it had fossilized into his voice. I told myself I was imagining it. Heroes don't get tired. The work was meditative. I found peace in the repetition, the careful attention to detail. Zavidius taught me to read the 1,000 small signs of system degradation, a servo that lagged by 0.03 seconds, a pressure seal weeping lubricant at a rate of 1 drop per hour. I learned to differentiate between 50 different mechanical sounds, to know whether a grinding noise meant bearing wear or misaligned gears. Within a year, I could disassemble and rebuild a Dreadnought's lower actuator assembly in 40 minutes. I was good at this. I belonged here. Honorius spoke rarely when woken. Sometimes he would ask tactical questions. Enemy disposition, chapter strength, strategic status. Zavidius would answer with the same patient detail every time, explaining battles Honorius had missed while sleeping, campaigns concluded, brothers fallen or ascended to the chapter council. Sometimes Honorius would request specific diagnostics. Check the left knee joint, he'd say. There's a catch at 40-degree flexion. He was always right. The ancient knew his own body better than any of our instruments. Once, during a year-end maintenance cycle, he asked me directly, "Your name, Serf?" "Petrok, honored ancient." My voice shook. He'd never addressed me before. "How long have you served?" 1 year and 4 months, honored ancient. Another pause, filled with that wet breathing. "Young. I hope to serve for many more." "Honored ancient." "Yes," he said. "You will hope." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. The other dreadnoughts in the fortress monastery had different temperaments. Brother Malachor was voluble when woken, always asking about the chapter's victories, praising the Emperor with fervor that made my chest tight with devotion. Sister Kaelara, yes. Sister. There were female ancients among the angels vermilion, a fact the broader Imperium seemed not to know, barely spoke at all, but hummed hymns while we worked. Brother Typhon argued with Zavidius about every procedure, insisting on modifications to standard protocols, convinced his chassis required special accommodation. They all seemed alive in different ways, personalities worn thin by centuries, but still present, still distinct. Honorius just endured. We were entering our 3rd year together when the deployment orders came. The Castoval salient had collapsed. An Orc AGA of unusual size had broken through the Imperial defenses on 4 worlds simultaneously. The Angels Vermilion were dispatching 3 companies, and Honorius was being awakened for combat, along with 7 other ancients. This would be my first time seeing him fight. I felt pride so intense it was almost painful. My ancient, my charge, about to bring the Emperor's wrath to the Xenos filth. The wake-up procedure took 6 hours. We had to bring all his systems online gradually, consciousness first, then motor functions, then weapons. Zavidius oversaw every step while I managed the secondary systems, watching pressure readings and temperature gradients with absolute focus. When Honorius's eye lenses finally lit with that cold blue glow, when his Vox caster crackled to life, I felt something religious settle into my bones. "Operational status," he said, the words grinding out. "All systems nominal, honored ancient," Zavidius reported. "You are being deployed to the Castoval salient. Orc assault. Estimated enemy strength." I heard the briefing. "When do we leave?" 14 hours. Understood. That was all. No battle prayers, no rage against the Xenos. Just acknowledgement. I told myself he was focused. Professionals didn't waste breath on dramatics, but that sound underneath his voice was louder now. That exhaustion. They loaded him into a Thunderhawk along with Brother Malachor and Sister Kaelara. Zavidius and I went with them. Maintenance crews accompanied dreadnoughts into combat zones to perform field repairs. I'd never left the fortress monastery before. Never seen the sky of our chapter's homeworld, let alone another planet. The lance of excitement that went through me when the Thunderhawk's engines ignited was sharp enough to hurt. Brother Malachor spent the flight reciting the Litany of Hate. Sister Kaelara hummed that same hymn. Honorius was silent, his massive form mag-locked to the deck, eye lenses dark. Conserving power, I thought. Being efficient. I wanted to be like that. Controlled. Perfect. Castoval was an agri-world, flat and golden under a white sun. Or it had been. By the time we arrived, the Orcs had turned 6,000 square kilometers into a burning wasteland. The drop zone was a cathedral complex on the edge of the combat zone. The ecclesiarchy had requested immediate reinforcement before their last stronghold fell. We came in under fire, the Thunderhawk shaking from anti-aircraft rounds, and I vomited into my helmet. I was so ashamed. Zavidius didn't even glance at me. The deployment ramp dropped, and the dreadnoughts walked into hell. I'd seen combat pics. I'd studied tactical briefings. Nothing prepares you for the sound of war, the constant roar of gunfire and explosions so loud you feel it in your organs. The screaming, the vox chatter overlapping until it's just noise, punctuated by the words contact and down, and they're everywhere. The cathedral was surrounded. Thousands of orcs, maybe tens of thousands, a green tide that seemed to regenerate faster than we could kill them. The Space Marines were already there, fighting from the cathedral walls, but they were too few. They needed the Ancients. They needed the Dreadnoughts. And the Dreadnoughts delivered. Brother Malachor charged the Xenos line with his siege drill screaming, smashing through orc bodies like they were made of wet sand. Sister Kaelara's Lascanons carved glowing lines through the horde, each shot vaporizing 3 or 4 of the creatures. Honorius advanced with terrible precision, his assault cannon cycling up with a sound like industrial machinery being tortured, and then the shells were pouring out in a stream of fire that turned orcs into red mist. The violence was beautiful. I stood in the cathedral doorway with Zavidius and watched my ancient kill with such efficiency, such perfection, and I felt blessed to serve him. The battle lasted 9 hours. Somewhere around hour 6, Brother Malachor's left leg actuator failed. He went down hard, still firing, still killing, but immobile. The orcs swarmed him immediately. We heard him laughing over the Vox as his power field overloaded and detonated, taking 50 Xenos with him. I was horrified. Zavidius just started running damage assessments on the remaining Ancients. Sister Kaelara fell an hour later. One of the orc war machines, they called them Death Dreads, I learned later got close enough to rip her weapon arm off. She killed it with her remaining power fist, but the damage was catastrophic. She fought for another 20 minutes before her reactor breached. The explosion cleared the eastern approach entirely. The Space Marines used the gap to launch a counterattack. Her sacrifice turned the battle. Honorius fought until the end. When the last orc finally fell and the silence crashed down like a physical weight, he was still standing in a crater of Xenos bodies, his chassis steaming, his assault cannon barrel glowing cherry red. He'd killed more than 2,000 of them. I'd kept count, watching the data feeds. 2,147 confirmed kills. A glorious tally for the chapter records. Honored Ancient, Zavidius voxed. Returning to Maintenance Bay. You have earned rest. The response took longer than usual. When it came, Honorius's voice sounded different, flatter somehow. Acknowledged. We began the post-combat maintenance in a requisitioned storage building behind the cathedral. The damage was extensive, but manageable armor plates that needed replacement, a damaged servo in his right arm, his assault cannon's barrel requiring sanctification after overheating. Standard procedure said this would take 12 hours minimum. I worked with focus that bordered on frenzy, grateful to have purpose again, something to do besides watch people die. 3 hours in, Honorius spoke without being addressed. Malachor and Kaelara. Zavidius looked up from the servo he was realigning. Both fell with honor. Ancient. The chapter will remember. Will we? The question hung in the recycled air. Zavidius's augmetic eye whirred, focusing and refocusing. I do not understand, honored Ancient. Will we remember them? The ones they've replaced. I kept working, hands steady on the armor plate I was installing, but my attention was completely focused on the Ancient's words. Something cold was forming in my stomach. The chapter remembers all who fall, Zavidius said carefully. No. That grinding voice, implacable as tectonic plates. The chapter records all who fall. Recording is not remembering. I knew the Ancient who fought in Malachor's chassis 600 years before Malachor was interred. I knew the Ancient before that one, and the one before that. 5 Ancients I have served beside, wearing that same chassis. I don't remember the first one's name anymore. I remember that I've forgotten it, but I cannot remember the name itself. Do you understand what that means? Neither of us answered. It means that forgetting is victory. Eventually, you wear away enough that you can't even hold the shape of what you've lost. That's when the pain becomes manageable. When you've forgotten there was ever anything but war. The Emperor requires our service, Zavidius said quietly. It sounded like pleading. Yes, Honorius agreed. He does. We finished the maintenance in silence. When Honorius's systems cycled down to standby, when his eye lenses dimmed, I felt relieved. I didn't want to think about what he'd said. I wanted to believe in the glory. I wanted my service to matter. The campaign lasted 3 months. The Angels Vermilion broke the Orc WAGH across 17 major engagements, and Honorius fought in 13 of them. Every battle, he performed flawlessly. Every battle, he killed with mechanical precision. And every battle, when we did the maintenance afterward, he seemed a little more distant, a little more absent, like he was pulling himself down into some deep place where our words couldn't reach. He stopped asking questions, stopped requesting specific diagnostics. He would wake, confirm operational status, fight, and return to standby without comment. I told myself he was just battle-focused. Warriors didn't have time for conversation during a campaign, but I was lying to myself, and part of me knew it. The final engagement was supposed to be a simple cleanup operation. The Orc warlord was confirmed dead, his WAA, AGH fragmenting, the remaining Xenos fleeing into the northern wastes where the Guard could hunt them down at leisure. Our force was just securing a manufactorum complex to ensure no Orc remnants were using it as a rally point. Easy work. 3 Dreadnoughts, 2 tactical squads, in and out. We should have known the Orcs don't do easy. They'd rigged the entire complex with explosives, crude, unstable, but devastatingly effective. The blast caught us in the central processing hall, a space the size of a cathedral nave. I remember the sound first, that deep, crushing whoomp that makes your skeleton vibrate, and then I was flying. I hit something hard enough that my vision went white, and when it cleared I couldn't hear anything but ringing. The hall was collapsing. Tons of reinforced rockcrete coming down in chunks the size of chimeras, and through the dust I could see the Space Marines scrambling for the exits. Organized retreat, tactical withdrawal. They'd make it out, most of them, but Brother Thymos, another ancient we'd brought for this operation, was down. A support column had fallen across his chassis, pinning him in place. The structural damage was catastrophic. His left side was caved in. He wasn't moving, wasn't broadcasting. Maybe already dead inside that armored tomb. Honorius was 10 meters away, undamaged, already moving toward the exit. The logical choice, the tactical choice, save the operational unit, abandon the wreck. Then Honorius stopped. I was trapped under a fallen beam, my legs crushed. I'd realize that later. The pain hadn't hit yet, but I had a clear sightline. I watched Honorius turn around, watched him stride back into the collapsing building. Servo joints screaming from stress as more debris crashed down around him. He reached Brother Thymos and grabbed the fallen column with both power fists. The structure was coming down. Massive slabs of ferrocrete falling like Emperor's judgment. Any second one of them would hit Honorius, and that would be the end. I tried to shout at him to run, to save himself, but my vox was dead, and my lungs wouldn't pull enough air. Honorius lifted the column. The servo whine was so loud it cut through even the collapse sound. Something in his chassis was tearing itself apart from the strain. I could see coolant spraying from a ruptured line, could see his left leg actuator starting to buckle. But he held it long enough for 2 Space Marines to rush back in and drag Brother Thymos's chassis toward the exit. Then the ceiling came down. The section that hit Honorius weighed perhaps 50 tons. It drove him down like a pile driver, smashing him into the floor, burying him completely. The Space Marines made it out with Thymos. I saw them clear the door just before my vision went dark again, unconsciousness swallowing me like a welcome void. I woke up in a Medicae station 3 days later. Both legs amputated at the knee. The augmetic replacements would come later. Zavidius was there when I opened my eyes, his human face looking older than I'd ever seen it. Honored Ancient. I managed to croak. We're retrieving him now. It's taking time. The debris field is unstable. The recovery took 6 days. When they finally pulled Honorius from the rubble, his chassis was barely recognizable. The sarcophagus had held those things are built to survive anything short of a direct plasma hit, but everything else was destroyed. Limbs torn off, armor plating crumpled, systems crushed. We transported him back to the fortress monastery in pieces. The chapter held a ceremony for the campaign's conclusion. Honors distributed. The fallen remembered. their names carved into the memorial wall. Brother Thymos, fully recovered, was there. The ancient had suffered only minor damage, would return to full combat readiness within the month, because Honorius had gone back, because Honorius had held the weight. They gave Honorius the Crimson Aquila, the chapter's highest honor. They engraved a new kill count on his sarcophagus, 3,426 orcs across the campaign. They spoke his name with reverence, and then they assigned me to rebuild him. The work took 2 years. The chapter had the components, the sacred patterns, everything needed to restore a dreadnought to full function. But it requires precision, devotion. Every system must be calibrated perfectly, every rite spoken correctly. Zavidius oversaw, but I did most of the actual work. My hands, my prayers, rebuilding the ancient who'd saved our brothers. I should have felt honored. I felt terrified, because I had to wake him for the deep integration work, had to bring his consciousness online while his body was still half assembled, had to listen to him while I worked. The first time I powered up his Vox caster, 7 months into the restoration, his first words were, "Did they get out?" "Yes, honored ancient. Brother Thymos and both tactical squads survived. Because of you." Silence. That breathing sound, wet and mechanical. "How long has it been?" 7 months since Castavel, honored ancient. "And how long until I'm combat ready?" 18 months, honored ancient. "Perhaps less if—" No, the word was flat, final. "Take the full time. Be thorough. Every single check." I didn't understand then. I do now. The work continued. Month by month, I rebuilt him. New actuators, new armor plating, new weapons. I performed every rite exactly as prescribed. I tested every system to failure point and beyond. I made him perfect. And every time I had to wake him for integration checks, he sounded more hollow, more absent, like something inside the sarcophagus was dying in ways that had nothing to do with flesh. 14 months in, I had to perform a consciousness integration test, making sure his neural connections to the new systems were properly calibrated. It required him to be fully aware, running combat simulations through the incomplete chassis, while I monitored the data flows. 4 hours of work. 2 hours in, he spoke unprompted again. "Do you know what they don't tell you about being interred?" I froze, hands still on the console. "No, honored ancient. They tell you it's eternal service. They tell you that you'll be a hero forever. They tell you about glory." He paused. The breathing sound seemed louder. "They don't tell you that you can't die. That's not metaphorical, Surf. We cannot die. The sarcophagus keeps us alive, the life support systems, the chemical regulators, the neural interfaces. I've wanted to die 8,612 times, I've counted, and I cannot. The body that might grant me that mercy rotted away 7 millennia ago. Now I'm just a brain in a box that refuses to stop functioning, piloting a war machine I can never leave." My hands were shaking. I forced them still. "Honorius, Brother Thymos will serve another 1,000 years, perhaps 5,000, perhaps 10. Because I went back, because I held the weight." His voice was the sound of stone grinding against stone. I added millennia to his sentence, and they gave me a medal for it. "You saved his life, honored ancient." "No, absolutely certain. I prevented his death. Those are not the same thing." I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond. So I just kept working, checking neural pathway responses, calibrating reflex arcs, doing the only thing I knew how to do. "You're good at this," Honorius said eventually. "Thorough, careful. The chapter will value you. I hope to serve for many years, honored ancient." The same thing I'd said to him 3 years ago, the first time we spoke. "Yes," he said. And now I understood what he'd meant back then. "You will hope." We finished the integration check. I let him cycle back to standby, and then I went to my cell and stared at the wall for 6 hours, unable to sleep, unable to stop hearing that grinding voice saying, "You cannot die, you cannot die, you cannot die." I wanted to quit. Emperor, forgive me. I wanted to request transfer to any other duty. Anything but this. But I'd been assigned to Honorius. The chapter had given me this sacred task, and underneath the horror, underneath the growing understanding that I was maintaining a tomb that held a screaming man, I still believed service mattered. I still needed it to matter, so I kept working. The final 4 months were the hardest. All the major systems were complete. I was down to detail work now, final calibrations, making everything perfect. And Honorius had to be conscious for most of it, awake inside his prison while I fine-tuned his chains. He talked more during those months, not asking questions anymore, just talking, telling me things. About battles I'd never heard of, campaigns against enemies whose names weren't in any record I could access. Brothers who died so long ago their chapter itself had been declared extinct. I remember a world called Phaedra, he said once, while I was recalibrating his targeting arrays. Beautiful world. Green. Water that tasted sweet, not recycled. We cleansed it of heretics, burned their cities, killed every man, woman, and child who'd touched the chaos taint. 3 billion dead in 6 weeks. He paused. The breathing. I remember their faces, not all of them, just the first city, the ones I killed personally before they interred me. I can see them when I'm in standby. When I'm supposed to be resting, they're waiting for me in the dark. They were heretics, honored ancient. They earned the Emperor's judgment. Yes. Toneless. They earned it, and I delivered it, and I'll deliver it again, and again, and again, for as long as this sarcophagus keeps me alive. There is no end. There is no rest. There is only the next enemy, and the next, and the next. Forever. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, wanted to tell him that service was glorious, that duty was its own reward, that the Emperor valued his sacrifice. But the words wouldn't come, because I was starting to understand, starting to see what they'd done to him, what we were all complicit in. They'd taken a man and made him immortal. And immortality, I was learning, is the cruelest punishment the Imperium knows how to inflict. The restoration completed on schedule, 22 months of work, every system perfect. Honorius was combat ready again, perhaps better than he'd been before. The chapter held another ceremony. Xavidius praised my devotion. The Tech Marines inspected my work and declared it flawless. I'd served with distinction. Honorius was deployed 3 days later. Another war. Always another war. I wasn't assigned to him this time. Xavidius had me working on a different ancient, one who'd just returned from a century-long campaign and needed full maintenance. But I watched the deployment. Watched Honorius walk up the Thunderhawk's ramp, his restored chassis gleaming with fresh honor scrolls and purity seals. Watched his eye lenses glow that cold blue as his systems powered up for combat. And I knew that he'd fight perfectly, knew that he'd kill with mechanical precision, knew that he'd survive, because that's what Dreadnoughts do. They survive. It's what they're built for. The new ancient I was assigned to was named Severus. He'd served for 900 years, young, by Dreadnought standards, still had some fire in his voice, still spoke about glory and honor and the Emperor's will with something like belief. Working on him was easier, less haunting, but I kept thinking about Honorius, kept wondering which battle would be the one where he went back for another brother, where he'd hold another weight, save another life, add another 1,000 years to someone else's sentence, where he'd earn another medal for prolonging another ancient's immortal suffering. I serve the angels vermilion still. 11 years now. I'm good at what I do, one of the best, Xavidius says. I maintain dreadnoughts with precision and devotion. I keep these heroes fighting. I perform the sacred work of ensuring the chapter's ancients can serve forever. And I understand, now, what forever means. Honorius is still fighting. I see the battle reports. 4 more campaigns, 6,000 more kills added to his tally, 3 more ancients saved by his interventions. He's a legend now. They speak his name with awe. The ancient who always comes back. the hero who never stops. I wonder if he's still counting, still tallying up all the times he's wanted to die. The number must be so much higher now. Sometimes I imagine what would happen if I made a mistake, if I miscalibrated something during maintenance, if I weakened a critical system just enough that the next time an ancient went into combat, the next time they faced impossible odds, their chassis would fail. A catastrophic failure, instantaneous, merciful. I never do it. I'm too good at my work, too devoted. And the chapter needs its heroes. The Imperium needs its immortal warriors, forever. But I taste oil in my dreams, that bitter, ancient taste, the essence of Honorius, seeping from his sarcophagus, black and accusing. And I understand that I'm not maintaining heroes, I'm maintaining hells, walking, fighting, eternal hells piloted by men who stopped being able to die so long ago they can barely remember what living meant. The chapter will give me augmetics eventually. They're already discussing it. Zavidius says, I'm too valuable to risk. They'll replace my failing organs with machinery, extend my service. Perhaps, if I serve with sufficient distinction, they'll even offer me the honor. The sarcophagus. Eternal service. Immortality. I pray they don't. I pray I die first. Quickly. Finally. Because I've learned what the Dreadnoughts know. What Honorius tried to tell me, in his grinding, stone voice, that the worst thing you can do to a person isn't kill them, it's force them to live forever in a cage of duty they can never escape, fighting battles that never end, serving a god-emperor who demands everything and grants nothing, not even the mercy of death. We failed on Castavel, all of us. We failed Brother Thymos by saving him. We failed Honorius by honoring him. We fail every time we rebuild these ancients, restore these heroes, ensure they can serve for another 1,000 years. And the Dreadnoughts don't fail. They never fail. They endure. They fight. They survive. That's the horror of it. The thing that keeps me awake in my cell, staring at the dark, tasting oil. We fail them every day by succeeding at our work. And they succeed by continuing to function, continuing to kill, continuing to serve, when the only success that would save them would be final, catastrophic failure. I still maintain them, still perform my sacred duty, still keep these walking tombs operational, because the chapter needs me to, because the Imperium demands it, because I don't know how to be anything else anymore. But I taste oil when I dream, and I understand now that it's not just oil, it's despair, given liquid form, hopelessness refined through 7,000 years of service, the distilled essence of immortality as punishment. Honorius taught me that. The ancient who saved his brother, the hero who held the weight, the dreadnought who cannot fail, who cannot stop, who cannot die, the one we failed by making sure he never could.